Every so often, a game comes along that is magical enough that you just gotta talk about it with your friends. And we've been wanting Nintendo to make a new 2D Zelda with new mechanics and new ideas. Well, they didn't do that, but somebody else did. What's going on, guys and girls? It's Zach from SwitchForce. I am joined by Gabe, and we are bringing you our discussion on Death's Door. This is the adult version of Monsters, Inc., if you will, a game that drops today, and it is freaking fantastic, Gabe. This one blew me away from start to finish.
If I'm allowed to give a little peek behind the curtain to the mind of Zachary, Zach finishing a game before me is almost unheard of. But he finished this oh so quickly. He got it like a day and a half before me, and it's not a very long game, so he was able to rush through, and that already let me know that this was going to be something special because this guy doesn't do that generally, and he did. So I was in for a good time, and I knew that.
And they sold us Death's Door from the opening trailer as more of like a Souls-like. That's what everyone kind of guessed it was. Souls-like, roguelike, boss rush. But it really is a 2021 modern era Zelda game. And this one isn't on Switch. It's on Xbox and PC. But what I'm hoping to do with this video, you know, that whole like speak it into existence thing, I'm hoping that by making the review together today and giving it a score at the end, we're going to will this thing onto the platform. So what's going on, everybody? Make sure to smash that like button and let us know in the comments down below if you want to play this amazing game. Nintendo didn't make it, Gabe. Acid Nerve did, but they had a lot of nerve to kind of go after the Zelda model.
It seems like multiple companies recently are going after Nintendo models and trying to do what Nintendo kind of won't do. But this was, I want to call it a pleasant surprise because it came out of nowhere for me. I had read maybe one article about this, and there's another game that's kind of similar to this coming very soon as well. But as soon as I saw this, I saw that you're this little crow. I saw that it has Zelda elements, and I heard Souls-like, and I was like, ooh, that's a good mixture. But it turns out that this isn't really a Souls-like per se. It is way more in the realm of what Minish Cap and Spirit Tracks do, but without like the Nintendo charm. Those had gimmicks on their respective platforms at the time. Of course, you got to draw with a stylus and stuff like that. That's not really present here. Maybe it is missing a little bit of that Nintendo charm. The vibe and everything else still going around is very 2D Zelda to me.
Yeah, it is smaller scale, right? There isn't as much scope or exploration as like a full-blown Zelda. This is a $20 package, but it has its own special charm, and I think it has its own gimmick, which is a heavy emphasis on combat. The world itself is it's just pleasant to be in. Like, yes, pleasant surprise, but also just so darn awesome to be a part of. Like, it's hard to explain like the feeling you get, but the graphics are great, the design elements are great, the music is great. Once you're in, like, it was one of those games I did not want to leave.
I just want to let people know that Zach is calling a world where there is literal dead bodies everywhere, there's blood all over them.
That's a special touch.
Pleasant to be in.
That's
you heard it here
touch.
first. I hate to see what your house is like.
One of the great touches they make is by just putting so many nice flourishes in that I think help ground this game with you. So there is blood after you kill enemies. It's left scattered on the ground. You know, Acid Nerve made Tiny Souls, and this is such a step up for them. This is really kind of just realizing, I think, a vision so well, and you can tell it's cohesive, it's coherent. Their idea was probably there from the start and carried its way to completion very succinctly. Every area you step into, Gabe, like, this is a place that has like world to it. It has lore to it without needing to be super explicit. And I'd say like that's the elements to me that do feel a bit Souls-like. Yeah, there is some involved combat. Like, you do have a dodge roll, of course, and you do have to be kind of quick with your strikes. But it's more that like explorative, just like learning things, repetitive imagery in the environments. That's the part more so than like, a bunch of difficult enemies or, you know, dying and losing progress.
While you're talking about the world and the exploration, that's probably like the one thing that was the closest to a Souls-like for me with this. The fact that if you do explore, there's not a lot to find. You'll find like packs of souls, I'm gonna call them souls. They don't get an explicit name.
Yeah, it's just unnamed currency, but that's what they are.
The other thing that you do find is like shortcuts, like in Dark Souls and those types of games. So that really incentivized you looking around, going through every nook and cranny, and making it so that when you maybe do get defeated a little bit further, you could just like beeline right back to where you were because you were able to unlock those shortcuts along the way. So the environments being as pretty as they are like samey sometimes, but there's still some decent diversity from big area to big area.
It's a rare game where like my incentive for progressing beyond the main, path was just to see more of it. Like that doesn't happen for me hardly ever. I need that like carrot on the stick, like you were saying, like some really awesome collectible. There's a small upgrade system here, but that's not the reason why you're exploring. The reason is just to like soak up more of the game. If I had any criticism, it's like I want it to be a bit bigger. This is like a 5 to 6 hour experience, and it feels like with one more area, this goes from like, wow, I love this, to like, okay, we gotta space this in, find a space for it on my all-time list. Like honestly, that's how good this is. It's just like right there.
No, it's missing a few things, and probably the next thing we're going to talk about here is like the difficulty. I found the game to be really, really easy. I was playing Skyward Sword HD a lot this week, and even that has like more difficult, and that's an easy game.
You think?
Yeah, dude. Like
it's different though, because like I think this is easy for like a experienced tenured gamer, but I wouldn't say this is like a breeze of an experience.
So here's what I mean. Maybe like the combat in Skyward Sword is also very like bah, 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 bah. Like if you're playing with motion, like that's what it is. But you can attest to this, sir. There are puzzles in Skyward Sword that will like slow you up a little bit. Like they'll take up some of your time. The Death's Door doesn't really have that. It's lighter on the puzzle elements, and for me, with Zelda games, that's part of the difficulty. Again, not necessarily the boss battles or the combat, just getting through all of this in a timely manner. And I was never stuck or anything like I breezed through this. I did.
Yeah, they're not punishing when you die. You don't lose anything when you die. You just kind of go back to the last checkpoint. And the game is done in such a way, especially early on, like you like you said, you can kind of just beeline through the old encounters. They make it so you can weave your way through if you want. You might get hit here or there. And then their life system, like you find these seeds, you can plant them, that replenishes. It sort of tricks you into thinking everything is going to be very scarce. Like, oh gosh, I got to conserve these seeds. I got to be really careful. But you kind of learn faster rather than slower that like, okay, like it's not going to push me too hard. But I did appreciate once you hit like hour 2, it does get you in that pocket of like, okay, I still want to survive. I don't want to die. I want to make sure I'm rolling out of the way. I want to make sure that I'm prioritizing my targets. And as the game goes on, they start throwing more and more enemies, and there are certain encounters where they drop in these doors, enemies unleash, and it does become, you got to manage everything, right? You got to prioritize target, get over here, get out of the way here, avoid multiple attacks. Like that was where I thought the combat thrived the most. And that to me was when I felt it was the most difficult, and then the final bosses are also pretty challenging.
You just touched on what I was going to bring up, like the bosses, right? Most of the combat in video games shines in boss fights. They put a spotlight on the mechanics and what you are learning along the way to get to that boss fight, and then you got to use that here. How did you feel about the bosses in this game?
There weren't as many as I expected. Again, just that initial trailer, it makes you think it's such a boss rush. And then they kind of show a lot of the bosses, but they are like my favorite bosses. They are my childhood bosses. They are like the pattern-based, do some goofy attacks. Then when they, get dizzy, then you go in and strike. They repeat it, and then finally they fall over. I love boss battles like that, but I was not dying on the bosses until the very end. This is a manageable game, but it controls so well. Everything is so snappy. The balance between the melee strikes and the magic attacks, like there's this really smart way that they go about making you make decisions. So like melee strikes, it's usually like a 2-swing combo, but magic you have to charge up. And by implementing that hold, it really makes you constantly decide, okay, do I have enough time? Do I have enough space to charge a magic attack? Or do I have to rely on melee? And I was always in this habit of like roll in, slash, roll back, charge up, fire, roll in, slash. And just that pattern
like
felt really good. Yeah, a dance, exactly. Dancing with a giant frog, dancing with an old lady. This is life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wait, that's your life?
It's a life. It's this poor crow though leads a very, I'd say sad life. The world itself, it's no it's not going to win a creative writing award, but I did like the characters. I did like the world, and I did like how it kind of all. It's half fantasy and half grounded, and that felt good.
There's some good comedy too. Like I chuckled at like some of the stuff. It's not trying to constantly make you laugh, but it's like a black comedy. It's like morbid kind of. Like you keep dying and with like some Nintendo-y charm. Yeah, like the secretary at like it's a company, I guess. That
Monsters Inc.
Yeah, that's really what it is. And the secretary like makes fun of you for getting like the wrong soul. He's like, hey, that's not the right soul. Like, you get back out there. So I appreciated some of that. The controls were very fluid, intuitive, easy to get a grasp on. And then once you do have it, you do get into that. I was going to say a two-step, but it's not a two-step because there's like maybe 3 or 4 steps to this more often than not.
Not a ton. Like they keep it pretty manageable. People are probably wondering like, how does this game progress? If it's not a roguelite, if there's not, Souls-like elements too much, it's via these major upgrades. And in this game, unlike Zelda, you're not collecting items that will help you through the different dungeons. You're collecting these magic spells, but those can serve as both puzzle solvers and traversal elements. I loved all of them. You end up with 4 spells by the end of it, and I thought each of them were awesome. I mean, I would have loved to see this team get even more money to push this further. I think they could have squeezed another 1-2 areas out of it and still been super fun. But I liked that their magic spells were aggressive and also assistive.
Yeah, I would have loved to have seen what was left on the cutting room floor, because you have to imagine that something had to have been left behind. You talked about the number of spells, right? It's kind of limited. There's 4 of them. Another thing that's limited is the weapons. Like there isn't a ton. There's I think 4 or 5 total as well, and
they're just not very diverse.
Yeah, you could finish the game without like fighting any, and you really won't be impacted. You could do the whole thing with your sword. You'll be all right.
Yeah, I had a electric hammer. That is what I ended up rolling with for majority of the game, and that did have like some chain lightning. So there is some
that barely does any damage, by the way. That
variance, but yeah, it barely does damage. And I would say like the upgrade system is there as sort of like, hey, it's got to be here. But I didn't feel like the upgrades really, and we're talking like the stat upgrades, like, oh, you can do a little more damage. Oh, your charge takes a little less time. Oh, your character has a higher base speed. Those to me, I didn't really notice all that much. And that system, it wasn't something where I was like grinding enemies to get more of their currency or anything of that sort. I cashed it in because I had it, but I think you could totally beat this game without upgrading anything.
Try it.
Well, you want more difficulty, so here you go. You were always trying to limit yourself because you didn't think it was hard enough.
Yeah, that was one thing I did do. The only way you heal in this game is with these seeds that Zach already mentioned. You can like carry like a bunch of them, but I limited myself to 3. I didn't want to carry more than 3 at a time, because that way I had to be a little bit more careful, because given that there is so little, almost no penalty for dying, other than just like a little bit of wasted time to get back to where you were. I wanted to put that little extra
personal pride.
Yeah.
Personal pride. And like my conservativeness came from like, I loved where I was in the world. I wanted to see the next step. I wanted to see the next adventure. I wanted to see the next room. And that is why I didn't want to run through it again. There are some puzzles here, and the spells kind of tie into that, but it's like, I equate it more to like Resident Evil puzzles, like stick the key in the door. Like it's not going to ever be anything that challenges you mentally. And if we look at it, it's like, okay, it has a similar perspective to like a Zelda type game. It has similar like dungeons and different rooms and enemies and even like pots, and there's no rupees, but there are pots. I wish the puzzles would have been stronger, because it feels like there's a few elements that if they were just tightened a bit, like, wow, this really like, this puts Nintendo on notice.
Yeah, look, given that it is like so short, 5.5, 6 hours, depending on how you play, but it kind of, we haven't mentioned it, but it makes sense for the price point. It's a $20 game. Right. If you do add more puzzles like that, and I'm not talking about like padding the time in a bad way, but you do elongate the time that you spend in this world, and a lot of it happens in a fun way. So I wish the puzzles were a little bit more involved. I wish that there was a little bit more there. So that's probably like the one like big glaring omission for me. Like the puzzles just aren't there.
To me, I was noticing like, okay, I feel like the more it turns towards a like difficult, challenging combat game, the harder it is to incorporate puzzles. And maybe this is just me, but it just seems like, okay, how are you going to expect someone to be dealing with all of these threats and also thinking about puzzle design, whereas like a Zelda game does have combat, but it's completely manageable, and a 2D Zelda, and then it's relying more on sort of puzzle dungeon navigation. I don't know if this is the ultimate balance, but I guess they could have moved a bit more in the puzzly direction. It's just a game that I think people need to play. It really feels like one of those indies for 2021 that is going to be at the top of everybody's lists, and it's because of, more than anything, like the undeniable charm. It really just has that X factor that, for me, especially with indies, especially in this style lately, is hard to achieve. Like, how do you differentiate yourself? How do you stand out from every other Souls-like, every other boss game, every other, quick combat with a little character? This one manages to make it all work.
Yeah, and everything we're mentioning here, if you'll allow me, Zach, it's coming in a different game very soon. Tunic. That is more difficult. That is more like puzzly. That is more of a Souls-like.
Very interesting to compare them.
Yeah, because they have a lot of similarities. They're coming out very soon. It's just like a few weeks different, I think, or a couple months. Mm-hmm. So if maybe you do want a little bit more difficulty, you want more souls in your Zelda, if this is Zelda Souls, then I would probably wait for Tunic.
I do think the new things they brought, like I know it's not super challenging, but the combat that they did bring here, and just a bit of the weirdness, I think played really well.
It's a satisfying game. Like, I never felt like, oh, this is like way too easy. Like, it's easy.
You still feel good when you complete, especially like those arena rooms where they throw so much at you. Like, I did that. The blood's all over. You like walk past like I'm the champ that just made that happen.
What's with this guy in the blood? Come on.
I think it's a nice touch. I think it just adds, world design is so important in a game like this to encourage exploration and to make it memorable, and they just have so many small, like the animations are really good. There's just small design choices. They're like, oh, that was a +1. That was absolutely a +1. And before we give our score here, I got to say that the glaring omission is that the game is not on Switch. And this feels like it would be perfect for Switch. It's a Devolver Digital game. Their catalog is very much on Switch. I don't know if Xbox threw them some cash or what the deal is, but I really, really hope that they get this one on Switch, even if it has to come next year.
Yeah, I think if it does well, I think it'll review generally pretty well. So a year from now, put it on PS5, put it on Switch, and boom, you have a second win of sales for a game that, for all intents and purposes, is probably going to do very well, because I do think that people are going to like it. And from what I've seen, just preview-wise from big outlets, like, they like it already. So yeah. I think the review scores are going to be pretty up there. And then next year, hopefully, I think it's a 50-50 as far as it being on Switch. I think there's a solid chance.
Yeah, I definitely could see it going either way, but I hope it goes the way we prefer. The game definitely worked out. It starts off with an interesting idea, and I think it's one that does get better as you go along. I won't spoil it, but to me, the final boss, they can be dicey, right? Do they make it too gimmicky, too hard? But the final boss encounter is very well done. And this game, when I beat it, I thought 8.5, but now that it's been about a week, it does stand up even after that short amount of time. So I will give this a 9 out of 10. I loved every second I played. I mainly just wanted more.
Yeah, I'm like right there. It's like an 8.5. A little bit of added difficulty, maybe a little bit more like puzzle stuff. Boom, 9. Maybe even higher depending on how that stuff is done. But since it did lack those things that I really, really love in games like this. Yeah, but it's still amazing. I had a really, really fun time. It is short. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It kind of leaves you wanting more. But Zach, you know what they say. You don't want to be the last guy to leave the party when everything is all destroyed. You want to be one of the first. You want to get out of there when maybe the crazy people are going to stick around and keep doing their thing. Just
That's
leave
a good point.
Yeah.
Like, leave them wanting more so that it's all good feels instead of maybe overstaying. I like that. I do think if we do get this on Switch, it does enter that really high upper echelon right there with, the best. Maybe not right at Celeste level, but like in the same conversation as the Celeste and the Katana Zeros. This is an absolute winner. Totally worth the $20. A must play for any fan of Zelda, fan of crows, fan of combat, fan of really beautiful worlds.
Fan of crows.
I mean, there's a lot, if you're a big fan of birds, if you're a bird watcher out there, all the bird calls. You maybe built a birdhouse in your youth. But let us know if you're going to pick up Death's Door in the comments down below. A wonderful gem from Acid Nerve and Devolver Digital. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, stay positive out there. Gabe, thank you for being here for this review. And now there are 2 Zelda games in July, and Skyward Sword isn't the only one. So thanks again, everybody. Have a fantastic day. SwitchForce out.